Will every baby's HIE injury, will it look the same? In other words, if your baby has an HIE diagnosis or HIE injury, is that injury going to manifest itself the same way across the board for all babies that deal with this condition? The reason why I want to talk with you about this today is because this is something that is really important. And we had a conversation with the family that wanted us to do a birth injury investigation, and they were getting some information from one of their groups that they were in, one of their support groups for special needs, and this question came up. And what I want to talk with you today about is not only how an HIE injury can manifest itself, but why it's important from a medical legal standpoint to understand the differences in the injury. Now, when we are doing an investigation, one of the main things that we have to be able to figure out for a family is what caused the injury. Why did this happen? Was this something that happened because of genetics or developmental issues, or was this something that was caused by the doctors or the nurses of the hospital? And depending on the cause of the injury, that may allow the injury itself to manifest in different ways. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. A lot of times when we are doing these cases and we're going through the medical records, when birth trauma has caused a deprivation of oxygen for a baby, we will see certain things. So for example, what we will see is the MRI scans or the type of head scans or brain scans. They will show certain types of patterns. A lot of times these patterns will reveal injuries to, as I've said in past videos, the basal ganglia area, the central part of the brain area, the brainstem. All of these types of areas will usually be impacted when there is an HIE injury and birth trauma is the cause of it. In addition to certain patterns, we will normally see the baby suffer seizures. The baby will suffer seizures either immediately after birth or a little bit down the line. Seizures will show up. In addition to seizures, you may also see issues with the umbilical cord gas or the gas reports. In other words, the umbilical cord pH, it will show that an acidotic situation occurred. You may see problems with the base excess. These are just some of the areas that are going to manifest themselves when a baby has suffered a traumatic brain injury and birth trauma is the cause of it. In other words, that oxygen deprivation happened because of birth trauma. Now, when you have certain injuries to, like I said, the basal ganglia area or the brainstem, these type of injuries are going to manifest certain ways. A lot of times these babies, they will have problems walking. They will have problems crawling. They will have problems speaking. They may have vision issues. They may have challenges with hearing. They may have issues with being able to swallow. All of these types of things may manifest themselves when there is an injury to that basal ganglia area and birth trauma has been the cause of the injury. So these babies will manifest injuries one way. Now, let's talk about another way. Let's talk about an HIE injury that has occurred and genetics or developmental challenges is what has caused the injury. When we are doing an investigation into the cause of the injury and there's been possible genetics or developmental challenges, there is an HIE injury, but that injury may manifest itself a different way. As I talked about previously, patterns on the scans, the brain scans or the MRIs. When there is a genetic issue or developmental issue, what you may see is a different type of pattern on the brain imaging. In other words, you may not have an injury to the basal ganglia area. You may not have injury to the brain stem. You may have injuries in other areas of the brain. And although you have an HIE injury, this injury, because of the certain areas of the brain that have been impacted, it may not manifest itself with the child the same way. And in addition to, when we're talking about these issues, when we're talking about the scans and things of that nature, in addition to that, the placental pathology, that is also key, because if there are problems or if there are challenges with the placenta or how the placenta has developed, then that in and of itself can, in some instances, cause a baby to have a reduction of blood and oxygen, which will lead to a brain injury. And remember, when we have genetics or when we have developmental, and remember, I'm categorizing placental issues also in with the developmental aspect of things. When these things are present, this is not going to be the cause of this injury. It's not going to be the fault really of anyone. It's not going to be the doctors, the nurses, the hospital. It's not going to be mom. It's not going to be dad. It's just something that can happen. Now, finally, and I know this video is a lot longer, and I'm hoping that you're staying with me with this because this is so important for families to understand when they're trying to find answers. From a medical legal standpoint, all of these things are so important, and that's why it's important to talk with someone like myself, a birth injury attorney who handles a lot of these cases and go through these medical records and understand these things. When we are trying to move forward with these cases, we have to be able to prove that there was a deviation or a departure from the standard of care causing the injury or the harm to the baby. And in this process, I know you heard me say standard of care causing injury or harm. That part of causation, that is something that is really hotly contested in these cases. And when we're doing our investigation, we have to have a grasp on causation, because if we can't tie it down, the injury, to something that the doctors, the nurses, or the hospital, or something that they did, then the case will not be successful. That is very important that you understand that. So in other words, if we're going through the records and we're going through the investigation and we find, let's say, for example, that the pattern on the MRI is problematic, it doesn't really match what a HIE birth trauma pattern looks like, or we have not only that, or we have a fetal heart strip that is pretty reassuring and there's not really any problems there, or we have a umbilical cord gas that is in the normal range, the base excess, it's in the normal range. All of these types of things and more, when we are looking at these cases, we have to understand how these pieces fit into the puzzle. Because if we move forward with a case like this and we don't have these issues wrapped up, the hospital, the doctors and the nurses, remember, they have their attorneys too. They are going to key in on these problem areas and they will be able to exploit them. So I know that this is an extremely long video for YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, some of my other pages. I know it's long, but this is really important. And this is one of the few videos that I'm going to do because it takes so long to do, as you can see, but I'm tying all of it in together. And I'm hoping that you understand that this is a process. This is something that you have to have people who know what they're doing with these cases. They know where they look. They understand the medicine. They understand the medical legal issues that are present, and that way they can give the family an honest and frank answer as to what may have happened regarding their child's brain injury at birth. If you have more questions, maybe you're watching this video today because your baby has an HIE diagnosis and you've listened to all of this and you have questions as to the cause, and you would like my office to be able to look at everything for you to try to help you understand. Maybe it was genetics, maybe it was developmental, or maybe it was something that the doctors and the nurses in the hospital, and you just want an answer as to what it was or what may have happened. If you have that going on, get your cell phone, pick up your cell phone, give me a call to the number that you see down below and call us. When you call my office and you talk to my secretary, it is very important that you give them a date and a time for us to be able to call you back and to get on our calendar and everything like that. So make sure you pick a date and a time. In addition to that, make sure that you have a working email, a good email address, because sometimes we have to correspond with people through email. So make sure you have a good email address. And finally, I practice law here in the state of Maryland. I know from time to time individuals will call me, they'll call my office. They're in the United States, but they may not be in Maryland. If that is you, just understand, if you're not in Maryland and you contact my office, that we have to use what we call co-counsel or local counsel. In other words, an attorney in your state. And that's something that we can, work to help you on. But I just want to make sure that you understand that co-counsel or that local counsel aspect of things if you are not here in the state of Maryland. All right, that's going to be it for today's quick educational video. Again, I'm Marcus Boston, and I'm one of the childbirth injury and medical malpractice attorneys practicing law here in the state of Maryland at Boston Law Group, LLC. We'll talk with you next time. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.